Relaxation is not the same as awareness. Although relaxation is necessary for developing awareness, awareness building requires intentional concentration. Therefore, awareness is definitely different from simply relaxing. When you are extremely tired, you may be able to relax very easily, but you may not have enough mental energy to observe carefully what is happening in your body and mind. For this reason, awareness practice should not be confused with simply lying down and resting. Relaxation provides a suitable condition for observation, but awareness requires deliberate attention, meditation, and observational skills. Meditation practices that lead to improved observational skills are highly recommended because the results can be experienced directly by the practitioners themselves. With practice, you may begin to notice things that previously passed unnoticed. For example, you may recognize that your breathing changes before you become consciously aware of anxiety. You may notice tension in your shoulders before you recognize irritation. You may detect a particular physical sensation before realizing that you are becoming angry. A future talk will provide a brief description of meditation for developing awareness. The details of that meditation technique, however, will not be dealt with in today's talk. Observing the causes of emotional reactions. The observation process should not address only the effects of emotions reflected in the body. It should also address the reasons that lead to the emotional reaction. Most emotions are triggered by some form of physical or mental pain. Therefore, the ability to recognize pain sensations should also be developed. For example, criticism may produce a painful mental reaction. A physical injury may naturally produce discomfort, rejection, embarrassment, fear, or disappointment can also produce unpleasant sensations. If we simply observe the emotion without investigating what preceded it, we may miss an important part of the process. Therefore, the details of meditation techniques related to becoming aware of sensations will also be discussed in a future talk. Developing an emotional history. As the awareness building process improves, our emotional history record should be extended to include the details of the pain sensation arising before the emotion. It becomes increasingly useful to ask, what did I feel immediately before the emotion appeared? Was there physical tension? Was there discomfort? Was there fear? Was there disappointment? Was there a feeling of being threatened, rejected, ignored, or insulted? It is quite clear that the nature of the pain sensation and its strength can have a direct influence on the resulting emotion. For example, two people may receive the same criticism. One person may barely react, while another may become extremely angry. The difference may partly arise from what the criticism means to each person and the sensations it produces within them. Learning to observe these details helps us understand our own emotional patterns more accurately. Awareness of mood and thought. In addition to paying attention to the body and sensations, it is also important to be aware of the prevailing mood and the thought processes at the time of the emotion. Suppose you receive a small inconvenience while you are already in a good mood. You may simply ignore it. But suppose the same inconvenience occurs after several hours of frustration and negative thinking. Your reaction may be completely different. Therefore, the emotional event cannot always be understood by looking at the final trigger alone. We need to consider the condition of the body, the sensations, the prevailing mood, and the thoughts that were present at the time. Awareness building techniques are capable of helping us observe these aspects as well. Developing awareness is different from using awareness. It is important to note that the development of observational skills is a separate task from applying those skills at the time of an emotional reaction. These two abilities should not be confused. You may become quite skilled at observing yourself during calm periods, but that does not necessarily mean that you will immediately be able to use the same skill when you are extremely angry or frightened. However, you must not postpone attempts to manage emotions simply because you think your observational skills are not yet sufficient. All of us already possess a certain level of observational ability. We use it every day. For example, we notice when we are becoming tired, when somebody's behavior is making us uncomfortable, or when a situation is becoming unpleasant. What is required is a special effort to strengthen and refine these skills, practicing in favorable and unfavorable environments. At the initial stage, the task of improving awareness can be practiced in selected environments that are favorable for such development. A quiet room, a peaceful time of day, or a situation in which you are unlikely to be disturbed can provide a suitable environment for practice. But eventually, the observation process has to be activated under unfavorable conditions, conditions that are likely to trigger negative emotions. This is where the real challenge begins. It is relatively easy to remain calm when everything around us is peaceful. The more difficult test comes when somebody criticizes us, when traffic is heavy, when an unexpected message arrives, when a colleague behaves unfairly, or when something we have carefully planned suddenly goes wrong. The level of awareness at these two stages is therefore not the same. As a result, it may take a reasonable amount of time before significant direct practical benefits are obtained from meditation practice. So, do not become frustrated and give up the practice. The difference between knowing what to do and being able to do it under pressure is often considerable. This applies not only to meditation, but also to skills such as sports, public speaking, or learning a musical instrument. Practice in calm conditions prepares us for the more difficult conditions, reducing exposure to harmful environments. There is another important point. Quicker results could sometimes be obtained by reducing the probability of facing potentially harmful environments identified through our emotional history records. Suppose your emotional history shows that certain situations repeatedly produce unnecessary anger or distress. If possible, you may be able to reduce your exposure to those situations. This does not mean that we should permanently avoid every difficult situation. Life will inevitably present us with challenges. Rather, it means that where we have a reasonable choice, we should not repeatedly place ourselves in environments that predictably produce harmful emotional reactions. For example, if a particular type of online discussion repeatedly leads you into anger, you may decide not to participate in that type of discussion. If a particular pattern of communication repeatedly produces conflict, you may change the way you communicate. If unnecessary interruptions repeatedly disturb your concentration, you may create periods during the day when notifications are switched off. These are simple examples of using knowledge gained from our emotional history. The value of awareness building. Finally, improvement in observational skills will definitely help us to record our emotional history more accurately. The better we become at observing the body, sensations, moods, and thoughts, the more accurately we can understand what leads to our emotional reactions. Therefore, awareness building exercises can help us reduce the harmful effects of negative emotions, even though the benefit may not always be immediately observable. Sometimes the benefit is very subtle. You may not notice that you have become more aware until one day you find yourself becoming angry. And instead of reacting immediately, you notice the change in your body, recognize the sensation, understand what is happening, and pause. That pause may be very small, but it can make a significant difference. The purpose of developing awareness is not to prevent every emotion from arising. Rather, it is to become sufficiently aware of what is happening within us so that we are less likely to be controlled by the emotion. With continued practice, observation can become more precise, emotional history can become more useful, and our ability to manage negative emotional reactions can gradually improve. That is why the development of awareness deserves an important place in the overall process of managing harmful emotions. Thank you for listening.